Antarctica is a frozen-over ice continent with nothing much other than penguins, research bases, and good horror movies. It has 7 official territorial claims, from France, the United Kingdom, Norway, Australia, New Zealand, Argentina, and Chile, which raises the question of why. Why is this continent with nothing much other than ice so interesting to humans? Now to start off, Antarctica was the last continent ever discovered by humankind. It's likely that early Polynesians made treks to the frozen continent by boats. However, these were never recorded. The ancient Greeks before them made predictions of the ice continent by stating that, in order to balance out the top-heavy northern hemisphere, a southern continent had to exist. The Greeks gave Antarctica its modern name by giving it the opposite name of the Northern Bear constellation. Exploration of the frozen continent never truly began until January 17, 1773, with British explorer James Cook, who became the first person to circle the Antarctic Circle. He crossed over it 3 times over a period of 2 years. He noticed that the cold, frigid conditions at sea debunked the notion that this mythical continent would be a tropical paradise. Cook himself never saw Antarctica. This record would go to Estonian-born explorer Fabian Benjamin Bellingshausen, who became the first person to see the ice continent when he went on a Russian naval expedition. On January 27, 1820, American John Davis became the first person to step foot on the continent on February 7, 1821. However, this fact is heavily disputed. During the heroic age of exploration, a race to the South Pole started. On one team, there was Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen, and on the other team was British explorer Robert Falcon Scott. Amundsen headed the trip because he had personal exploration reasons of claiming the South Pole. He had previous experience crossing the Northwest Passage, while Scott had a more scientific approach to his mission. He wanted to land on the continent for scientific and zoological reasons, and he also wanted to explore the Ross Sea, an area that the British really wanted for sealing purposes. He had previous experience when it came to Antarctic expeditions, attempting a shot at reaching the South Pole, yet having to retreat. Amundsen would be the one to reach the South Pole on December 14, 1911. After 99 grueling days, Scott would have no idea that he was beaten to the finish line until January 17th of 1912.
God damn you all to hell!
Scott and his team never made it out alive. They died due to hypothermia, and they are still buried within the ice continent. In the early 1900s to the late 1930s, Britain decided to conquer multiple regions of Antarctica. This was because they were a globe-trotting empire that wanted to strengthen their spheres of influence, and because they wanted to tax the whaling there. However, France and Norway would both try to challenge these claims by taking up portions of the continent themselves. France took a part of the continent which is now called the Adelie Land. It's named after the wife of a famous French explorer, and it was not recognized by Britain at this time, which is why France decided to strengthen its claim there. It got worse for Britain when Australia and New Zealand became independent. Portions of the continent that were leased to them when they were still under the British Empire became their own territory, which really made it worse for Britain as the Ross Sea, which is one of the reasons they explored Antarctica in the first place, came under control of New Zealand. It would get even worse when Argentina and Chile would take parts of the continent that were owned by the British. Then, a new challenger would approach in the form of Axis Germany. Germany would grab a specific piece of land that nobody actually recognized at the time. After World War II started, France and Norway would both be occupied by Germany, making those pieces of the Antarctic continent de facto Germany. Germany during World War II may have thought of itself as, but it was completely conquered by the Allies, and all of its Antarctic territories were completely relinquished. Soon, the United States would eye up Antarctica. This was because, in a hypothetical war with the Soviet Union, Antarctic conditions would be similar to those in the Arctic, even though Alaska was right there, but nobody cares about that. The existential risk that the United States or another world power like the Soviet Union would claim ownership of Antarctica for themselves would start the In the year 1957, the International Geophysical Year had just started. This year was a productive one for science. It brought world data systems, the first satellites, and also brought a new front for Antarctic exploration. The foundations and institutions of the International Geophysical Year would bring about future collaboration and science on the continent, and would bring about the Antarctic Treaty. The Antarctic Treaty was signed on December 1st of 1959 in Washington by 12 nations. The Antarctic Treaty stipulates multiple key agreements: no weapons, no warfare, and no weapons of mass destruction, only peace, research bases, and science. To add on, no other territorial claims would exist on the continent, except those by the United States and the Soviet Union, and its latter state, Russia, which had vested interest in the continent. The Antarctic Treaty, which is still in effect today, would bring an era of peace and harmony on the continent. In the 1970s, when both Chile and Argentina were under military dictatorships, both sought out to further strengthen their claims to the continent. In the later half of the 1970s, Argentina sent a married couple to the continent, which was significant as the woman was expecting soon. This would lead to the birth of Emilio Palma, who is the first human being to be born on Antarctica, on January 7th of 1978. Chile got mad at this, so they sent their own married couple to conceive a child on the continent. November 21st, 1984 was when Juan Palma Camacho was the first person to be conceived and born on the continent. This weird baby race is why, as of now, 11 people have been born on the continent. Most nations at this point never really cared about this pathetic race, as they had been interested in new areas of geology, biology, and astronomy. When most people talk about Antarctica's future, they will most likely talk about climate change, which has caused tons of melting on the continent's ice. However, there's another rarely talked about angle about the continent's future, and that is its potential large-scale colonization and the impact of it. When the Antarctic Treaty expires in 2048, the rules negating the colonization of the continent outside of scientific purposes will be completely thrown out the window, meaning that the continent will be up for grabs by several different powers. Antarctica does have some valuable resources, like geothermal activity, which can be used and harnessed for energy. However, our current resource extraction methods are very harmful for its natural beauty and ecosystems. What we can all hope for is in the future that the institutions laid out by the Antarctic Treaty will be respected and edited for future use.